Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. Right, so today on the podcast I have got James McKemey, and he is Head of Policy and Public Affairs at PodPoint. So James, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for the invite, Liz.
Well, and we met at Solar and Storage Live, and it seems ages ago now, but it was October last year. Time has just flown by, hasn't it? Because you were on a panel discussion with Tom Callow as well, weren't you? And I've interviewed him already.
Indeed, yes. He was the moderator on that day. That's right. Yes.
He was. I called him. I said he was a compare, but then I was getting confused between compare and comparing. But anyway, so yes, he was the moderator on that. But it was a very, very interesting discussion about the EV infrastructure, wasn't it? So PodPoint, you've been with PodPoint since 2011, so you've been there a fair while now, and you started. I've kind of written all this stuff down. So you were a senior business development manager, then you moved into head of technical sales. You've been head of customer operations, and you've kind of moved through the company, haven't you? And now head of policy and public affairs. So what was your journey to get there? Because it was incorporated in 2009, wasn't it, PodPoint? But
That's right.
So you were there. You were a bit of an early adopter, weren't you? Really?
Well, yeah. I'm the longest serving employee at PodPoint, and I have a bizarre sort of career path through PodPoint, which I think reflects it being an early stage business. You just do what needs doing, and then find yourself in interesting places. So, prior to PodPoint, I graduated in physics, and I had a career for about 5 years in environmental consultancy. Got a start with my dad. My dad has an environmental consultancy firm, and then I went on to work for a multinational called Parsons Brinckerhoff, which got bought out by Balfour Beatty, then WSP, etc. So I was with PB for about 2-3 years. And unfortunately, we got rather impacted by the last financial crash. So the writing was on the wall there. We didn't get back on the framework as we didn't bid competitively enough, I think, for the pricing at that time.
Right.
So I spent about a year bid writing because the work sort of somewhat ran out, and eventually I was made redundant. But it meant I'd done quite a lot of business development at that point. So I went away and started doing temporary jobs. The economy wasn't great in sort of 2009, 2010 time. And I started looking around to see what I wanted to do next. And I enjoyed environmental consultancy, but it didn't seem the most commercially exciting field. A lot of very, very well qualified people, not with massive earning potential, it seemed. So I wanted to find something that had an interesting sort of commercial aspect. But I really liked working towards something that had a greater purpose. And I watched an interview with a chap called Shai Agassi. Slightly sad story. He had a firm called Better Place. He raised about $650 million to start a charging infrastructure firm where they had a sort of battery swap component based out of Israel. And I watched an interview with him at the end of 2010. He made a really compelling case for electric vehicles and that this is going to be a massive growth industry. And I thought that seems to marry, the environmental side, physics background, bit of a commercial interest. Yeah. So I thought maybe I can get involved with that. I called Better Place, spoke to their office they had an office in California, and the receptionist found it amusing that I had a British accent. So it made me think, this might not be the most international and professional organisation. There was nothing doing in the UK at that time, but I had a look around to see what there was. I managed to get an interview with a firm called Electromotive, which was based very near to me. I'd been commuting to London for about sort of 3 years then, and felt I'd done enough of that. And Electromotive were based in Falmer, which is only a quarter of an hour drive down the road from where I was. And I thought, this is perfect. It's all come together. Had an interview, got a inconsequential or sort of a response that was a kind of a medium, sort of not a no, but maybe at some point when you're looking for work, that's kind of heartbreaking. Then I noticed PodPoint had put a advert up on their Twitter saying we need someone to do sales and marketing. I was like, well, I haven't really done that before, but how hard could it be? I really applied to try and force the hand of Electromotive because PodPoint were based 50 metres from my office, the one I've been commuting to,
right.
and I thought I really don't want to have to do that again. But their stuff looks kind of cool and their website looks cool and everything. I don't know how to compete against that, but I just don't want to do the commute. So I went into and met the team at PodPoint, met our current CEO in my second interview, and at that point I thought, no, this is where I need to be really. Once you see the energy in the firm, and the ambition, and I guess a degree of self-belief, even though it's very early days, I thought this is just where I need to be. So as soon as I got a job offer, I did not go back to the other firm. I said, yes, please, and I was off, and I was commuting away again.
So hang on. So where were you living at the time? You've moved since then? Well,
I'm a mid-Sussex boy, and I was living down in mid-Sussex at the time. And so I've always been around vaguely the same area, as it were. But I started commuting up to PB. I wanted to stop doing that. Then I had an interview at PodPoint, and I was like, that's where my career's taken me, so I'm back on the train.
Crikey. So our PodPoint, are the offices based in central London then?
That's right. At the time it was right by Liverpool Street. We've been through since then. We've been in the same office nominally since 2015, but of course since 2020 we've been remote first. So we work from home essentially most of the time, but we have an office still at Old Street, or very near Old Street. But we've been through 2 sites in Liverpool Street, 1 out in Whitechapel, etc. But all London based. And the issue is, as soon as you start recruiting to London, you're stuck because people come in from all over the place, and it's very hard to uproot it and move it away from central London.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how many people? So when you first started, then how many were actually? Because you said you're the longest serving member, but how many were actually in the company at that point in time? Because it was 2 years into its kind of inception, wasn't it?
I was the 8th into the office at that point. I think I'm employee 11 on my payslip. But yes, I've stayed. They haven't managed to get rid of me just yet. But yeah, there were 8 of us in an office. So I can't remember our exact numbers at the moment. We're around 550. We're still with plans to grow. So obviously very
people.
Yeah. So it's a very, very different organisation now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a bit about, or tell everybody a bit about what PodPoint do, would you? Kind of, so obviously you're involved in EV infrastructure, but what exactly do you provide?
That's right. So I think we're a leading provider of charging infrastructure, predominantly to the UK market. When we first started, we did sell a bit into Europe. But I think the startup mantra is that you nail it and scale it, and I'd say we got that one a little bit the wrong way round to begin with. So we consolidated back to the UK, kept an arm in Norway, but we've actually consolidated largely back to the UK with a bit of Ireland now. That's where we work. And I think fairly uniquely, we try to attack all elements of what we call the charging ecosystem. So I'd say we're arguably the biggest provider of home chargers in the UK. Then we're pretty big in work as well, and we think those two are massive. We think that's up to 90% or so of charging is going to happen between those two spots. Then we do public charging as well, so particularly destination charging. We've got high-profile rollouts with the likes of Lidl and Tesco, supermarkets, amongst a whole load of other businesses. The other element of the charging ecosystem is the en route high-powered stuff. For me, we're not so strong in that. It's an area where we've been a bit circumspect. They're big investments that are needed in that high-powered infrastructure. So we may look to do that when it's strategically in our interest in future. And we do want to provide all elements of the charging ecosystem. But our view is the high-powered stuff actually is a very small proportion of charging that needs to be done. It's optically very important. And if you don't do it well, you are limited to half the range of your electric vehicles. You have to get there and have to get back. With a good en route network, it's as free to go anywhere you want, whenever you want to, as a petrol car is. but you just don't actually need it very much unless you're a very atypically high mileage user. I don't have a home charger myself, and I haven't used an en route charger now for at least 6 or 7 months. So that's why our focus is predominantly on the AC through to some destination DC type stuff. What's a bit different about PodPoint is most of our competitors now tend to focus on one area of this. So likes of Instavolt will be very focused on DC charging and en route and rapid charging. Other firms will be focused exclusively on home. Some will focus very much on fleet. We kind of try and do a bit of all of it. And that has some challenges, because then your PD, your product development team, is stretched across a whole load of different priorities. But equally, it has some benefits as well. So it's quite likely that people will find us in a Tesco car park, become familiar with our brand, and then be aware of us when they're looking for, say, a home charging solution or charging points for their workplace, etc. So that balance is always a bit of a tension at PodPoint about doing everything all together at once, which is very, very challenging, but also can be rewarding in some ways.
Do you know, it was funny. I was, I've been doing some work. I've been doing some work last year, kind of around sort of September time, up in Wandsworth, and one of my colleagues is taking on this bit of work, and I was trying to explain to her how to get to because it's basically I've been doing some improvement work in the NHS. So I was trying to explain to her how to get there. So I was on Google Maps. Now, I didn't realise, I'm assuming, I don't know whether it integrates with ZapMap or something, but I could see that just outside, just very, very near to where she had to go, was a PodPoint charge point. And I was like, oh, okay. So Google is now actually showing charge points. And,
Yep.
and I just thought, well, that's absolutely brilliant, isn't it? Because how many people use Google Maps? I mean, I use it all the time because I'm a bit sad like that, but I do. But, I just thought, and of course it had to be PodPoint. And I was like, oh, I'm talking to James on Friday.
Well, there you go.
So yeah.
Yes,
So actually people can, the fact that people can find you or find one of your charge points is, or even your competitors, sorry and all, but they can all find them. To me that makes it makes total sense for everybody.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful. Google have started to show that in the last couple of years, and I think we'll try and develop those integrations moving forwards. But certainly we are not afraid. We're not afraid that we have competitors. If we had no competitors, it would be because it'd be a terrible field to be in. I particularly deal a lot with our competitors and get on very well with the staff there. So obviously we compete, so we want to win and all those sorts of things. But I'm very happy to use other people's charge points when I need to.
Absolutely, and yeah, I think you're right. It would be very sad if people didn't have competition, because how would you know how to improve?
Well, where would the incentive to improve?
You didn't have a bar to meet.
Yeah, exactly. Your competitors drive up quality, and they drive down pricing, so that's very, very important. And ultimately, we're all kind of on the same side. A lot of the time, if we provide good charging infrastructure, it's a pull factor on more people getting or more people being more enthusiastic about driving electric cars, which actually provides more opportunity to sell more charging infrastructure. So to some extent, yes, we compete, but in many ways we actually work together.
Do you know what, that helps me move on to a question that I was going to ask you anyway, which was about EV adoption anyway. So do you feel that EV adoption's moving in the right direction, or do you feel that it should be quicker? Do you wish it was quicker? What are your thoughts there?
I'd say yes to all three. It's definitely moving in the right direction. Should it be quicker? Yes. Do I want it to be quicker? Yes.
I can imagine. I already knew before I asked that question what the answer would honestly be, but I'm
just very positive. Yeah. Absolutely. So we have had very, very high growth over recent years. High double digits year-on-year growth. 2022 we didn't so much, actually, particularly after about sort of April, and a large part of our businesses are home charging installations, and those are very directly linked to the sale of new vehicles. And we've started to see growing waiting lists for new EVs and slightly slowing growth in that channel. So we've just had a really good December, as I talked to you at the moment. So it's about 30% of cars. I caution that we get a little bit carried away with sort of divining the narratives on when things are good and bad, depending on when Tesla's boat stock in the UK. And obviously they had a big delivery in December. But
I heard
broadly, we've been a little bit sort of plateaued in terms of the rates of growth from particularly the back half of next year. Now, obviously, macroeconomic conditions are a factor there. And we hope to see that pick up as we move forward. But we are still growing, right? This industry is still continuing to grow. For me, the biggest constraint is the challenges that the OEMs are having on providing vehicles. So we often have it put to us that charging infrastructure is reducing, isn't good enough, and that's slowing up the adoption of electric vehicles. I don't think that argument is valid until you can deliver one of these cars at least within 6 months. If your waiting lists are over a year, I think it's quite strong to try and suggest that you've got a demand problem. I'd suggest that's exclusively supply. Yeah. So there are factors, and that's not to be complacent. We need to get better as an industry. We need to get better as a company in terms of the provision of charging infrastructure. We've got to keep doing that and getting better. But the limiting factor on uptake is, can we please have some more electric cars? People love these things. They're really, really good cars. And there's huge unmet demand. And of course, when we start to talk about affordability as well, we need more 250-mile affordable full battery electric cars. There's a huge market for that already. And of course, as those cars come to market, it becomes easier and easier for us as a sector and a business to start providing charging infrastructure.
So you said that the actual there's two things. One thing I was going to ask you was it strategic what Tesla did? It had to be strategic, the whole December delivery, or if they were. They knew that people were going to be saying, right, the number of electric vehicles is increased by X in 12 months. Then surely they must have done that on purpose and kind of made sure that their delivery was ready for, here we go, December, we're doing it. Do you not think?
I don't think so. So the thing with Tesla is they don't need to game the system, because all they do is electric cars. So we have seen in the past some OEMs will start to heavily discount stock vehicles through sort of November, because they need to hit their fleet CO2 target at the end of the year. So that can be a bit of a tip for people if you want to have a look at what leasing firms have in stock. Then you might be able to get some deals as you head to the end of the year. Really, with Tesla, they're just flat out the entire time producing as many cars as they can, and obviously they're producing them, selling them globally, and it's just a question of when they arrive. So you can get some unusual things. It's been a really bad month because the Tesla shipment came in the month before, and you haven't had any cars for a little bit, and I do think that's just pure coincidence on that one. Other firms who conventional OEMs may need to game the CO2 thing, so you might find there's a bit of a stock dump at the end of the year, heavy discounts to get things in there. But with Tesla, I just think that thing runs flat out the entire time. They rock up when they rock up.
Okay, all right. You've proven me wrong there. Then that was just me thinking.
Proof is strong. I'm theorising. That's all I do.
All right, your theory is pushing me in the other direction. And the other question I was going to ask you when you were saying, yes, the whole manufacturing of electric vehicles, the timescale is the period of time that your people are waiting. I mean, it is a long time, isn't it? So I've been, for my first few I've kind of taken a few EVs out for test drives, kind of before Christmas and kind of in the last few weeks. Because I didn't want to be running this podcast and not be doing it. The whole point of this podcast is to take, me talking about the journey that I've been on, so I can actually tell everybody else. And actually, I have to say, so I test drove a Cupra Born, and there was a PodPoint charge point there, and I was like, again. But it was interesting because do you know what? That was the first time I'd physically seen somebody charging an EV, because it's one of those things where if you go to a charge point, I've seen them around, but I'm not going to go up to somebody hanging over their shoulder going, "Excuse me, can you just show me how this works, please?" So actually the saleswoman was actually, kind of the vehicle was charging and she was showing me, and actually I just thought, do you know what? I like this. It's kind of, it makes so much sense. And yeah, she was very, very knowledgeable. And I'm going to I'm running another podcast another time about my experiences with dealerships, because I've had a real kind of mishmash of positive and negative experiences with those. But to cut a long story long, my question: how do the charging operate? So you said the charging infrastructure needs to improve. How? Just what are your thoughts on how can you improve? What are the areas that need improvement? What are your thoughts?
The short answer to that is all of it, all the time. And that's not to say it's terrible, but everything needs to get better all the time. And what's the biggest challenge that charging infrastructure firms face? I think it's the sheer scale that we need to deliver. Okay, so we have already, so as you rightly pointed out, so I was head of customer operations at some point. That was when we scaled from doing sort of 100 to about roughly 100 to 350 home charging installs a month over the period I looked after it. Yeah. That felt immensely painful. Every single one of those is minor building works in someone's house, which is a very sensitive environment. And when things go wrong, it's quite painful to deal with, and you have to put it right. We look back at that, and that seems like a very small and easy time compared to what we've been dealing with. And that's happened very, very quickly. And hats off to our operational team for keeping up with some quite extraordinary growth, particularly through sort of late 2021. That's not slowing. Now, it is at the minute. If we talk about exponential S-curve growth, we've got a bit of a knee in it at the moment as a result of the supply chain crunch, etc. And that just makes the other side of that even sharper. So where do we need to, what's the biggest challenge for charging infrastructure? Really, it's going to be scaling to meet that demand. Okay, that's an exciting problem to have. If you're in sales, that's a wonderful problem to have. If you're in operations, it's a scary one.
Rubbing your hands together.
Well, indeed, yeah.
It's like a game of tennis, isn't it? The salesman goes, "Dush, there you go. There's a load of orders," and the operations team go, "Ooh," and that's when they start kind of going, "Oh my god," don't they?
Yes, well, indeed. How many? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's a fundamental challenge we have basically across the industry, and I'd say that's number one. But then we need to get better at, quality needs to be better. You learn stuff as things go out into the field. So we're continuously improving on that. We need to get better at maintenance. As you start to learn about your stuff that's in the field, you learn, right? And you can only learn by doing. Experience is absolutely invaluable. And as a result of that, your systems have to get better. You need to get more efficient. Your business has to scale very efficiently. You can't just keep growing headcount in line with charge cycles. You need to get the machine better, etc. So that's a business focused look at that. If I look at what we call the charging ecosystem, we project about 60% of charging will happen at home in terms of energy flow to vehicles. Today it's much higher than that, be around 80%. But as people who can't charge at home start to come into the market later, we think that 80 comes down to 60. We think about up to 30 or so will happen in the workplace, which is a very, very high proportion. And that is a massive, massive growth opportunity. Okay, so providing the right infrastructure into those environments is a huge, huge challenge, and also a really, really useful charging opportunity for those who can't charge at home. It's about probably the second most convenient place you can charge. You're lightly taking your car to work every day, and it sits there for a long time. So that's a big area of growth. Destination, I think, is cracking on pretty well. I think it's got huge potential. I'm a big believer in local long stay charging overnight. I think that's got real potential. Indeed, I do a lot of that myself. There's a long stay car park at Hayward Station, which I use for that. And we're starting to get some of our competitor units into local village car parks. And if I'm in trouble, I'll go and use one of those, etc. So lots to happen in destination. But I'd say for me at the moment, maybe the pinch point is actually the en route side. And that's why we get the negative headlines we've been seeing recently. There was a big headline because some Tesla drivers had to queue once. I found that slightly. I mean, obviously, it's not much fun for that experience, but it's kind of extraordinary that was such a big headline. Only because Tesla drivers typically have a pretty good experience en route, and that's a result of Tesla's decisions on.
I saw that headline myself.
Yes, it did. Well, it's led to a lot of media interest in charging infrastructure firms as a result of it. So, but I think. For the non-Tesla drivers, we've seen a lot of people looking to invest in the en route side, and as I say, PodPoint has not really done so much of that ourselves. And I don't know that it's too hard to do as an industry in the long run. It does take some time to get there. But when we look at things like the Rapid Charging Fund, the sort of money that's being dedicated to that, the firms who are dedicating themselves to solving it, and obviously we would like to get involved to some extent in that if the opportunity arises. I think you can get that done probably easier than people might think, right? So over the next, say, 10 years, I think you can get a very, very good en route provision. Where we are today, I'd say that's a slight pinch point at the moment. We need to get more out into particularly things like motorway services, etc. As I say, not a big area for PodPoint as a business, but if we look around the charging ecosystem, that would be one of the bits that seems to catch people out. And of course, the other sort of elephant in the room is, okay, what about those people who can't charge at home? There is no one answer to that. It's a range of solutions that will provide that opportunity. We can go into that in some detail if you want. But actually, where I see the industry, or particularly where PodPoint sees the industry today, is we will likely grow the industry through the people who can charge at home. And we can get a very long way on vehicle uptake through those people. Now, as a result of that, public charging infrastructure will grow because the utilisation becomes more reliable. It becomes a safer investment for more and more providers. And that starts to, sort of snowball the growth of the charging infrastructure. And that then makes it viable for those who can't home charge. Because, well, there's chargers everywhere, right? I don't necessarily need one at home because these other ones are being provided. And arguably then you can start to crack things like on-street charging at scale. That's something my CEO is a big believer in. I've spent some time selling to local authorities, so sometimes that can be quite difficult. But I do think if we want to do this at scale, there's something there as well, potentially.
Yeah.
But it becomes viable when you start to think of a car as electric by default. At the moment, a car is petrol by default, right?
Exactly.
So if you're going to go and put a load of charging points down a street, chances are to be petrol cars parked by it. Yeah. As that starts to flip, the potential utilisation in those solutions starts to become more and more viable, and that potentially comes on stream. A lot of people will say, well, the idea you're going to run these sockets down roads is just absurd. Think of all the civils work. This is, I just can't see it happening. And I push back a little bit on that and say, if you were starting from scratch and told people what you were going to do with broadband, you'd have the same response.
Of course
you're going to run a cable down every road in the country. I mean, like, the amount of work you're going to do, but of course we're going to do that. It's really important. People need it. And I think there's an element of that gets that comes in at some point as well.
It's all witchcraft. Everybody be thinking, like the 5G towers and everything. No, can't do that.
We've got enough of that going on, I think.
I know. I would like to ask you, how easy? So you talk about home charging installation. So for somebody like me, how easy is it? We've got we're lucky. We've got a drive. It's a little drive. It'll fit a couple of cars on it. How easy is it to install a charge point at home then? Because that's of interest to me and probably other people actually. Yeah,
so first you need to do your 18th edition regs to qualify as an electrician, Liz, if you're keen to do this.
Okay, thanks. I'll go now.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, okay. I would suggest that wasn't what you were asking, was it? So,
No.
is a little bit how long's a piece of string. So essentially, we need to run your charging point back to your consumer unit in your house.
Yeah.
And there is a certain amount of variability. Now, we've bounded what we call a standard installation. So it's up to 15 metres of cable run, etc., etc., etc. We'll go through, I think we'll penetrate like 2 walls within a standard install, and that covers the vast majority of our installations. But of course, there are still some which are non-standard, which get more difficult, if it's going past your moat or something down to the staff quarters, etc. Starts to get more
Do
challenging.
I look like I've got a moat outside? Honestly,
I couldn't possibly judge.
It's a drive for 2 cars, love.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
that.
I'd aspire to have a drive with 2 cars, Liz. So
You live in London. Well, no, you don't. No, you live in Sussex.
the
so that's
southeast,
wrong.
but yes,
Yeah.
that's very true. So we need to run essentially your power source is where your consumer unit is.
Yes.
We won't get too technical about Henley blocks and everything, but we fit to that area. We run a cable, usually SWA, out to where your charge point is going to go. So that's the process essentially. Obviously, there's certain cable clamps which go in, etc., etc. You can tell how hard your install is going to be pretty easily by working out, okay, where is my consumer unit in my house?
Yes.
And where is the charging point going to go on a wall? And obviously being on the wall is a lot easier. They're all designed really to go on walls. So occasionally you have somewhere, actually my drive is some way from the house and I'll need to put a freestanding mount in, non-standard, additional civils, all that kind of stuff. But for most people, think about, okay, where my consumer unit is. So usually that's where your meter is in your house.
It's kind of just behind where my little office is here. So,
right.
yeah,
now, is that the front or the back of your house?
It's in the front of the house, and I know where the point would go. It'd go at the other side of my office, at the front of the house, just here.
Well,
So
you don't sound too bad, Liz. I think you'd be. Yes, that sounds a friendly setup to us. I mean, the dream come true for a home charge installer is I want it in my garage. My consumer unit is in the garage right next to it, and it's one wire between the two. I'm like, well, sweet. Right, I'm on my way. And obviously you get all sorts of things, all sorts of potential challenges once you get into them. But for the most part, most home charge installs are pretty straightforward. And for some years, we've tried to make this as standardised a process as possible. We ask a few questions to get a bit of information about the installs, so we know whether we need to get additional information, whether this is non-standard, or we just send an installer ready to go with the charging point that you'd like. And one of the big gains in this is typically quite sort of high volume, low margin work. So what you really don't want is to discover that you can't install and you've got an abortive call out. So that's the game. Try and get as many of the installations complete in the first hit as you can. And as a result of that, we'll typically ask for a couple of images to help us assess before we go ahead.
Okay.
But from what you've told me there, without looking around you, I would have thought you'd qualify as a standard installation.
So my actual little office is half of a converted garage. So, but it's literally on the side of the house. So it should be perfect.
It should be fine. So the only thing that comes then is things like aesthetic considerations. So if you're sort of like, well, I want this chased into a wall so no one sees the cable, I want it to be completely invisible, that might have some additional impact. And we always think the smartest installs, we call them floaters. So the cable enters from the back of the wall, and all you see on the outside is a charge point, as opposed to a wire running into the side of it or bottom of a charge point. But yeah, that's the general game.
What about is there an option for like a maintenance contract? Do they need maintaining? How does the I'm assuming it'll be kind of all. There'll be lots of software inside it, so there'll be lots of software upgrades and things like that, and apps that you can download.
That's right. So again, talking specifically about PodPoint, but it's pretty similar for our competitors as well. We have apps which operate the charge point, collect data, all those sorts of things, as well as the physical charge point itself. And indeed, the software typically lives in the cloud. The units themselves are relatively basic, and software is controlled from the cloud. And PodPoint's approach to this is all the information is conveyed in your app rather than putting a screen on the unit. So we tend to find people don't actually spend much time at the unit, so that screen isn't a wise investment. Whereas being able to carry a phone and you can see what's happening on your charge point is a more cost-effective and useful way to go.
Okay, so there's no kind of maintenance requirements or anything like that.
Right. Yes. Sorry, that's maintenance. So warranty is I think the most important thing. So we sell a 3-year warranty on the charge point and the installation as standard, and you can buy an extended warranty as well. Are there maintenance requirements? Of course. Are there support requirements? Yes, absolutely. As you move on. The units themselves are relatively hardy. We've sold a lot to Norway in our life, so we have at least hundreds sat in the Arctic Circle, which is kind of mad to me.
Yeah.
And that have lived out there for many, many years without any difficulty at all. And of course, things go wrong now and then, so there is a maintenance function at PodPoint as well to look at anything that might go wrong.
Okay, so have you got an idea how many charge points you've actually got in the UK then? Do you know what the number is? It'll be in the thousands, I know, won't it?
Well, I think we're over 150,000. Now, I say you need to look these things up because some of this is we are now public, so you have to be very careful what you state in public. But if you go and, if you go and look to the PodPoint Investor Relations website, our latest data will be provided there.
I shall have a look on there. Right.
It's not the most exciting part of our website, but it's accurate financial data.
Yes, but I need to know these things, don't I? So if I wanted to ask you kind of like, I've only got a couple of questions left to ask you at the moment, but what would you say are the things that somebody like myself and you, what do we need to be doing to kind of achieve net zero? What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, so net zero is a much bigger topic than electric vehicles.
Exactly.
And I'd like to consider I'm climate immune because I work in the field of charging infrastructure, but clearly that isn't the case. The electric vehicle is an enabler. So I'm probably at the techno-optimist wing of how we address climate change versus the degrowth wing. I think it's very difficult to tell people we need to throw away all our modern lives and go and subsist on the land. People are just not going to do that. So
not going to happen, is it?
No. So the options you have available then are, okay, you've got to decarbonise. We need to decarbonise the grid and then electrify everything. And in that lens, you can then see what the purpose of the electric vehicle is and how that is contributing. And it's good, right? The electric vehicle is broadly a very good idea. That doesn't mean it's impact free. There's a lot of impacts. I'm very excited about the prospects with battery recycling that will get to a closed loop situation where, we've got probably decades of pulling a lot of metal out of the ground to make this happen. But I think there comes a point where the requirement for new minerals actually dwindles because recycling is so viable. Yeah. So that side of it, I think, is pretty good. Net zero, though, there's a lot of other aspects to that. There's things that we have to address particularly in farming, in manufacturing, in clothing, particularly all those sorts of things. If we are just going to give everyone an electric vehicle, then you're probably going to find net zero a lot harder compared to, and obviously we work in central London. If I'm in London, I'm straight on a Boris bike. I'm not interested in driving around London. It's an insane thing to do with your time. So that's all about public. Yes, so all about public transport. But I'm a massive believer in cycling in urban centres. I just think it's the quickest way. It's a very nice way to see. From our office, I spent some time in Westminster, obviously working on policy. Going down to the Thames along the front of the embankment, etc., is a wonderful thing to do. So we need to twin the electrification of vehicles with more active travel, with more use of public transport as well. So it isn't, we can't say, well, we solved the electric vehicle and now we've done net zero. That's clearly not the case. There are a lot of associated challenges with it. But at the same time, you need to do something. So if you're just going to look at net zero and say, in its totality, it's overwhelming. You go, well, I can't. How on earth am I ever going to do that? And I think the point is you just want to get busy working on something, right? Find an angle here that you can make a difference to and start working on it. And that's how you make progress. You know, it's often quite boring, and it's often unseen, and it's hard, and it's graft and all those sorts of things. But everyone tackling part of the problem gets you a long way. And I'm not really a big believer in the doom narrative. There's a lot to worry about with climate change. But if we endlessly say that the world is going to end and everything is terrible, that does not motivate me to crack on. What I find much more interesting is, okay, we've not had all of the outcomes we want from global policy events, COP20, whatever. But what we've done is actually move the needle a lot. You know, we are starting to see the money flip from fossil fuels to renewables. This is starting to happen at scale, and it's real. You know, just one other field. There's a chap called Tony Sieber. He had a couple of books which are quite interesting. He had a recent big piece about lab-grown meat and the impact that's likely to have on farming, and obviously the big economic challenges that will come along with that, but the dramatic emissions reductions that kind of stuff might deliver. Now, clearly, I'm not working on that at all, but I'm glad someone else is. Right? So my area is I've picked electric vehicles. I really believe this is going to be an extraordinarily impactful way of contributing towards net zero. Passenger cars are a huge emitter in the UK, and if you want to contribute, if you really want to contribute, yes, you can look at your own lifestyle and your own and how much you fly, your diet, all these sorts of things. If you want to dedicate your career to it, I wouldn't stare at all the problem and say all the time.
No,
I'd pick your field.
Choose something small and just go
and contribute. Yeah, exactly right.
Absolutely. I should have been asking you about policy, because you were just talking about going to Westminster. And so what are you? How are you contributing to the policy that's kind of been implemented in the UK? You've got to tell me this, because I haven't asked you this bit, and I should have done.
Well, you've had Tom Callow on as well. We both spent a bit of time doing that. So obviously I have to say we've been well supported by government as an industry. Generally, the office, it was the Office for Low Emission Vehicles, became the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles about 18 months ago or so. That was formed in about 2010. And so right at the end of the new Labour term, it was their creation, and it's carried on and been funded through all the different hues of sort of Conservative and coalition governments we've had since then, and we've always had a very, very productive working relationship with OZEV, and we are fans of those guys. We tend to think they've broadly got the big calls right. They've made some big calls recently in terms of reductions of direct subsidy, etc. We are less concerned. There are some people who are very, very anti that. We think that's okay. You cannot have your industry living exclusively on direct subsidy forever. You've got to stop doing it at some point. And particularly when you've got things like the benefit in kind reductions, which have proven really, really potent on getting new cars to market. We think those sort of measures have been really, really successful. What do I do on policy? I tend to respond to policy consultations and converse and try and shape things in ways that are, we believe are in the consumer interest and indeed PodPoint's interest as well. So that's kind of the game. And you mentioned my rather sort of strange amorphous career through PodPoint. No one has ever told me to do this, Liz. This is one thing I should say. When I was head of customer operations, I was running a team and dealing with customer issues and grant claims and various other things like that. But some very interesting consultations came up, and it was no one else's job. So I wrote the response and said to Eric, our CEO, we'd say that, and yeah, cool. So it was around 2016 was the initial benefit in kind consultation, and that proved a very impactful thing in time. There's some difficulty to get through it on the way. So I started doing that, and I'd been selling through the public sector for a while, so I knew a lot of the people there, and it became clear that this is something where we can have an impact. I'd say probably the most exciting impact we've had is the 2030, 2035 ban, as it were. That is huge because it's told the automotive industry that they can't lobby this; it just has to be done. And there was a lot of no way, no way, no way on the way in. And then as soon as the decision was made, it's like, yeah, great, we were investing more and more and more. And each OEM would come out in the news and say, our phase out date is this, our phase out date is this. So you can really see how effective those measures are. And then we've had some really nice charging infrastructure ones, part S of the building regulations. Every bay associated with a parking bay associated with a new dwelling now has to have a proper charge point installed. That's a big policy that will drive things forward a lot. So those are some of the policy kind of wins. And of course, on the policy and public affairs side, gets it interface with obviously ministers and certainly shadow ministers at the moment as well moving forward, which I find fascinating and very, very interesting. And my CEO is less enthusiastic about, so I get to go and do it all until the message comes through from number 10, and then he's there. He likes them. I don't go to those ones. He takes those ones.
Goodness, you've just honestly, it's really insightful and interesting to kind of hear all this and hear everything that you've done. I suppose, I mean, I could finish off by talking to you about your Radio 4 and your LBC interviews. Should we finish on that one, and you can kind of give some insight into how that went?
Well, it's much like this, Liz, if I'm honest. It was, you turn up at a certain time, they ask you questions, and you try to answer. We were talking about charging infrastructure came in for a bit of had some negative press over the Christmas period because some Tesla drivers had to queue. Yeah, this is what we were saying, wasn't it? Yeah. Yes, indeed. And I think it was Giles Corran wrote a very scathing piece. It wasn't so much, it was a combination of charging infrastructure, and he was annoyed with his own personal vehicle. But that sort of causes some interest in the industry, and we've had quite a lot of comment pieces put out. And I put a comment in the Times, and I think it got picked up by the team at the PM programme, and they invited me on. I'm a massive Radio 4 fan, so I was nervous about that one. That was rather good fun. And I was providing counterpoint to Ian Dale, who's a political commentator with a show on LBC. Interacted a little bit more on Twitter, and he invited me on to discuss some things on his show as well. So yeah, but very good fun. You don't know when these things will come up, but they can be entertaining and fun to do. Oh, it's brilliant. Honestly, it was funny. I was just obviously researching you before we were speaking, and just having a look, and I was like, oh, that's what he's been doing this week. That's interesting. So yeah, well, interesting, especially if you're a big Radio 4 fan. That's brilliant. But look, just to finish off, if people are wanting to find you, I always ask this question because I always think it's really worthwhile, because there will be people hopefully who are listening to this or watching this that actually are interested in contacting you and talking to you about kind of installation or if they're interested in being customers of yours or whatever. How do they find you? Where are you mostly hanging out? Well, indeed, obviously we have a very good website, pod-point.com. We try and put a lot of information on there. Obviously, part of my job has been to write a lot of the content in terms of guides. So guides for drivers, guides for businesses, ways to think about charging infrastructure, all those sorts of things. We've even got short guides to pretty much all the electric vehicles on the market as well, key stats, all those sorts of things on our website. We're on all the socials, the business is quite active on LinkedIn. I love Twitter. PodPoint's very active on Twitter as well, yes. On Instagram, whatever else. So that's the place to go. And I am James. I think the most interesting stuff from charging infrastructure is probably PodPoint. So you certainly can come to me, and I can put you in contact with the team. But we've got an awesome team at PodPoint. I say we're probably about the most knowledgeable organisation in terms of installation of charging infrastructure of all types. Great built environment team, great commercial operations function, all those sorts of things. So whatever charging infrastructure you want and whatever stage of the event you're at, we've probably got about the most experienced professionals in our company who can help you with whatever your queries are. And if that's a basic home charge query, Liz, then there's a great team waiting to help you on that one as well. Wonderful. It's been really, really interesting talking to you, James. I really appreciate it. And we didn't even get a visit from your cat, did we? No, he settled down. There was a big risk you get Gus the cat. This has been
You're
an absolute
worried
pleasure.
that the cat was going to jump and stick its bum in the camera or whatever,
or
just
attack
meow on
my
the light.
face, which is his
Yeah,
favourite thing at the
that's
minute. But yes, no, we didn't get that. But yeah, Liz, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you ever so much, and we will see each other again, I'm sure, in the very near future. But to everybody else, I will say goodbye, and I shall see you next time. Thank you, and thanks, James. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon, and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.